Let's say a very good morning to Isabel Oakeshott, Talk's international editor. Isabel, welcome to Morning Glory for the first time.
You have made me so happy just listening to your defence of the health benefits of moaning.
Yes.
I mean, what a way to start the day. The sun's shining, I'm looking at you, I'm hearing you moaning. What more can we say?
Yes, and we're very good at it. I mean, I think if there was a national or international moaning competition, I'm sure Britain would certainly make the final, if not the top four, because we do like to do it. And this is what I'm saying. This station is all about that. We get people on, we take calls, people have got things to say, we have a laugh, but people like moaning in this country. It's very good for you.
Well, in fairness, there's an awful lot to moan about, and then once you've got it off your chest, you can go out and try and enjoy the good bits of our country, because there are still a few things.
There are. Well, I've sat very happily in a beautiful public house on the river yesterday afternoon. Had a few drinks with an old friend of mine, and we had a lovely, lovely time. And there's very few places in the world better than a pub in London watching the world go by in the River Thames. As long as you don't catch Russell Brand getting baptised anywhere near you, it's fine.
that would be a definite heart sinker, if not a person.
It would. Now, I heard you on Kevin O'Sullivan's show last night talking about this mad Elphicke story, because, I mean, I can't quite believe that it's happened. I can't understand why it's happened, and I take your view that this must be about something else, but I can't work out what it is.
Well, I'm afraid to say I haven't yet got to the bottom of this.
Yeah.
I've made a couple of calls. I actually know quite a few of the people involved in this,
right,
because Natalie Elphicke's ex-husband, Charlie Elphicke, was years ago a good contact of mine when I worked on the Sunday Times. He ended up, I'm sorry to say, in prison.
Yes.
He's out of prison now, and I haven't been in touch with him then, but I've dropped him a line just in case our Charlie can shed some light on this.
Yes.
Also, Natalie Elphicke's former brother-in-law was the MP for the city in Westminster, a Tory MP called Mark Field, who I also know. So this is a very Tory family,
yes,
one way or another. As many people have pointed out, Natalie Elphicke was hardly on the left wing of the party.
Not at all, not even in the centre, really.
I mean, her Damascene conversion just defies belief. I don't think anyone at Westminster thinks that it's credible. So therefore, something else is very definitely going on here. I'm certain that she must be on some kind of promise. What that promise is, I don't know. So I guess at Westminster this morning, from the people that I've talked to on the Labour side, there's a bit of a division of opinion, because we know that Neil Kinnock and a number of others have come out very vocally saying, look, this is not a great idea. Keir Starmer's Labour Party is now being labelled the kind of dustbin for defectors. And so there are plenty of people who feel this is just really scraping at the barrel. On the other hand, there are some who argue, look, let's look at this really simply. Does it hurt Rishi Sunak? Yes, it does. Right. It's not a great look for him. And do we in the Labour Party want Tories and Tory voters to switch over to us? Yes, we do. Therefore, on balance, it's worth having Natalie Elphicke.
Yes. I mean, I was talking to a former Labour advisor who said, you know, that the people of this country will see Tory defects to Labour. They might not know the ins and outs, they might not remember the ins and outs, and they'll think, well, if it's that bad in the Tory party, then maybe if I voted for them last time, maybe I shouldn't this time.
Yeah, I think we also need to address the elephant in the room here, which is, why didn't Natalie Elphicke defect to Reform?
Right.
After all, Reform UK has a much more convincing policy on border control than Labour ever does. I don't see how she could objectively argue against that. And since she's standing down anyway, if we're to take that at face value, then her decision isn't based on a calculation of whether she will or won't hold on to her seat. And, you know, personally, I think it's disappointing that she didn't defect to Reform, but I don't speak in any way for the party leadership on this. They might say, actually, I'm not sure we would have wanted her. She's so tarnished in so many ways.
Yes.
That I'm not sure we would have accepted her. But nonetheless, I do think it is very curious that she's made that decision to go with Labour. It cannot be, in my personal view, on a point of principle. So something else is going on here. please, Sunday newspaper journalists, do your job.
Well, I mean, there's some suggestion that she might be after some kind of housing appointment, which may or may not be a paid appointment. I don't know whether she's in need of money or whether she's able to operate sort of, you know, completely freely like that. But she wasn't much of an MP. Kevin and I both were saying this last night. You know, we tried many times to get her on to talk about the crisis in immigration, the crisis at Dover, the crisis of the border force, and she very rarely ever did.
Well, she was a disappointing MP. I mean, she's had tremendously difficult family issues to deal with, no doubt about that. I know she has children, you know, his husband was in prison. It's hardly the ideal scenario from which to be an MP. But then again, she did put herself forward. And I think many people will have thought there was something rather distasteful about the way that the seat was just effectively kind of passed from this.
It was sort of grandfathered in, wasn't it?
Yeah, it just didn't feel quite. It didn't feel quite right, did it? But I think, given that she had that seat, which is absolutely, literally on the front line of the single biggest political crisis, apart from the economy, facing this country today, she could have turned it into a tremendous platform for political good and for change, and been a real champion of securing our borders. And that was a wasted opportunity. And instead, she's generally shied away from the press, very sporadically popping up to say something, but not really championing the security of our borders at all. And now suddenly, at the 11th hour, she defects to Labour, claiming that they've changed. Just doesn't fly.
It really doesn't fly. You're absolutely right. We're going to talk about David Cameron now, but before we do that, I've just got a text to read out to you, because we've been asking this morning about the story that apparently Gen Zers or Gen Zers don't like using words like plonker and pillock and wazzock and all of that, which of course we love here. And this one from Julian in Coventry says, "Morning, Mike. I nominate David Cameron as a right plonker. He's the man that started to cut the armed forces to the bone. Now says we have to get tougher with China and Russia. I despair." He's making a speech today, isn't he, the Foreign Secretary, in which he's going to say we must be tougher on Russia and China. Well, what does he think we're going to do?
Look, I've just got no time for hearing this from David Cameron. It was under David Cameron and George Osborne that the rot in our relationship with a increasingly aggressive, even at that time, China really set in. I mean, China and Russia are our biggest state-based foes, and David Cameron and George Osborne, between them, had basically a policy of appeasement towards China. In fact, it was worse than that. I mean, it was a policy of actively cultivating the Chinese, and they sought out Chinese investment. They didn't at all take heed of many warnings that were coming, that China is not our friend. China does not wish us well. China wishes to exploit the relationship for its own ends. They're not our friends. And, you know, for Cameron, as your caller rightly pointed out, you know, again, the paring back of the armed forces began very soon into Cameron's premiership in the early days of the coalition. So I find this quite hard to stomach, actually.
Right. And he hasn't really got any idea of how tough we could be anyway. I mean, we saw Vladimir Putin yesterday with that remarkable inauguration that seemed to go on forever. Today we've got Victory Day in Russia, and whatever happens around the world where David Cameron gets involved, whether it be the Middle East, whether it's Russia, whether it's China, we don't seem to win anything, including the PR war. You know, we've now got Russia looking as if, to all intents and purposes, they're ready to conquer the rest of the world.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we were talking earlier about Gen Zers and the types that are out there protesting about Gaza and Palestine and all of that. I would like them, and these are people, by the way, that are always going on about, you know, the shame of the British Empire and how we should pay reparations and, you know, how colonialism was dreadful. I would like them to pay a bit more attention to what modern day colonialism looks like. I mean, first of all, we've got Russia trying to expand its empire, as it were. Don't hear Gen Z getting too stressed about that. They're not out on the streets marching for more support for Ukraine. And secondly, I mean, have these young people who protest on the streets of London about Gaza, and who demand reparations for slavery and all our, they want statues taken down and so forth that are reminiscent of the British Empire. Have they got any idea what China is doing in the poorest parts of the world, across Africa and parts of the Caribbean, which they are effectively colonizing by building airports and buying up things and bringing their labor over there? I mean, these are effectively modern day mini colonies.
Yes.
And I hear none of those lefty, woke, bleeding heart young people crying about that.
No. Guess why? Because they don't know about it. Because they don't know about anything. They just know about what they've seen on TikTok. And that is the tragedy, I'm afraid. Isabel, great to see you. Good to talk to you. And let's not forget, a good moan will get you going in the morning and probably in the afternoon and probably in the evening. I'll see you later. Isabel Oakeshott there, the international editor here at Talk, of course.